The invitation to celebrate my cousin Lisa's promotion came with the usual family assumptions about my financial situation. "We're going to Marcello's," Mom had said on the phone. "It's expensive, but don't worry about it. We know you can't afford that kind of place." Marcello's was indeed expensive. An upscale Italian restaurant downtown known for its authentic cuisine and elegant atmosphere. It was also my restaurant, though my family had no idea. I'd purchased the struggling establishment 18 months ago through my hospitality investment company, renovated the kitchen, retrained the staff, and transformed it into one of the city's premier dining destinations. The previous owner had been hemorrhaging money due to poor management and outdated operations. Under my ownership, Marcello's had become profitable and earned recognition from food critics across the region. But my family still saw me as Alex, the college dropout who'd never found his footing in the real world. I arrived at the restaurant wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, deliberately casual compared to my family's dressed-up attire. They were already seated at a large table near the window. Mom and Dad, my sister Jennifer with her husband, my brother Michael and his girlfriend, plus assorted cousins and their spouses. "Alex," Lisa called out as I approached. "Congratulations on making it. We weren't sure you'd come." "Wouldn't miss celebrating your promotion," I replied, taking the empty seat they'd saved for me at the far end of the table. "How are things going with your restaurant consulting?" asked my Uncle Robert, the family's unofficial financial advisor. "Still helping small places with their menus?" I worked as a restaurant consultant, which was technically true. I consulted for the restaurants I owned, helping them optimize operations and improve profitability. But my family assumed I was freelancing for mom-and-pop establishments that couldn't afford professional management companies. "Business is good," I said simply. "That's great," Robert continued. "Maybe someday you'll save up enough to invest in a place of your own." "Maybe," I agreed. The waiter appeared to take drink orders and I could see the family mentally calculating costs. Marcello's wine list started at $40 a bottle, and the entrees ranged from $30 to $60 each. "Should we look at the prix menu?" Jennifer suggested quietly. "It might be more budget-friendly for everyone." She was trying to be considerate of my assumed financial limitations, but the prix menu was actually more expensive than ordering à la carte for most parties. "Order whatever you'd like," I said. "It's Lisa's celebration." Dad leaned over with a patronizing smile. "Alex, we appreciate the sentiment, but we don't expect you to contribute much to the bill. We know consulting work doesn't pay like traditional careers." The assumption that I couldn't afford to contribute stung, especially since I was sitting in my own restaurant listening to my family worry about my finances. During dinner, the conversation centered on Lisa's new position as marketing director for a mid-sized advertising firm. Everyone praised her success and asked about salary increases, benefit packages, and advancement opportunities. "It's such a relief to have financial security," Lisa said. "No more worrying about making rent or whether I can afford a nice dinner." "That's what real careers provide," Dad added, glancing meaningfully at me. "Stability, benefits, a future you can count on." Michael nodded in agreement. "The gig economy is fine when you're young, but eventually you need to think about retirement, health insurance, building wealth." "Alex will figure it out," Mom said with forced optimism. "He's always been creative. Maybe he'll find a way to turn his restaurant hobby into something more substantial." The food was excellent. My executive chef had outdone himself with the evening specials. The service was impeccable, and I could see my family enjoying themselves despite their concerns about the cost. "This place is incredible," Jennifer's husband commented. "The flavors are amazing." "How did you hear about it, Lisa?" "Online reviews," Lisa replied. "It's supposed to be one of the best Italian restaurants in the city. The owner completely transformed it from some dive that was about to close." "Smart business move," Robert observed. "Buy low, renovate, build a reputation. That's how you create value in the restaurant industry." I sipped my wine and listened to my uncle explain restaurant investment strategies to a table full of people eating in my restaurant. As dessert arrived, the conversation turned to future family gatherings and who might host the next celebration. "We should do something nice for Alex's birthday next month," Mom suggested. "Maybe a barbecue in the backyard. Something more his speed." "That's sweet of you," I said, "but you don't need to adjust your plans for my budget." "Nonsense," Dad replied. We know you work hard, but consulting fees don't compare to corporate salaries. There's no shame in living within your means. That's when the waiter approached our table with a confused expression. The build-up. The waiter, Tony, had been with Marcello's since before my acquisition. He knew me as the owner, but I'd asked the staff to treat me like any other customer when I dined with people who didn't know about my ownership. "Excuse me," Tony said hesitantly, "but there seems to be some confusion about your bill." Dad looked up from his tiramisu. "What kind of confusion?" "Well, sir, the owner wants to comp your entire table tonight." But when I told him the name on the reservation, he said to check with the gentleman at the end of the table first. All eyes turned to me. I could see my family processing what they'd just heard. "The owner wants to comp our table?" Lisa asked. "Why would he do that?" Tony looked uncomfortable, clearly realizing he'd walked into a family situation he didn't understand. He said something about it being a special occasion, and he wanted to make sure Mr. Alex was okay with it. "Mr. Alex?" Dad repeated slowly. "You know the owner?" Jennifer asked me. Before I could answer, Tony continued, "Should I tell him you'd prefer to pay for your meal, sir? He's in the kitchen if you'd like to speak with him." The table had gone completely quiet. My family was looking back and forth between me and Tony, trying to piece together what was happening. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I think I'll go say hello." I walked toward the kitchen, leaving my family staring after me in confusion. Through the dining room windows, I could see them having an animated discussion, gesturing in my direction. In the kitchen, my executive chef Carlos looked up from plating desserts for another table. "Alex, how's dinner going? Your family seems to be enjoying everything." "They are. The food has been outstanding tonight. Should I prepare something special for the table? Maybe send out some complimentary limoncello? That's a nice touch." "Yes, let's do that." I returned to the dining room where my family was waiting with expectant faces. "So," Mom asked, "do you know the owner?" "You could say that." "How do you know him?" Dad pressed. Before I could answer, Tony reappeared with a bottle of limoncello in small glasses. "Compliments of the house," he announced. "The owner wanted to personally thank you for dining with us tonight." As Tony poured the limoncello, Dad's patience finally ran out. "Alex, what's going on here? How do you know the owner of this restaurant?" I looked around the table at my family's confused faces. These were people who'd spent the entire evening discussing my lack of financial success while eating in my restaurant. "I know him pretty well," I said carefully. "Alex," Mom said in her sternest voice, "stop being mysterious. How do you know him?" Lisa leaned forward. "Did you consult for this place? Is that why he's comping our meal?" "Something like that." Robert, ever the businessman, was studying me with new interest. "Alex, consulting fees don't usually result in free meals for your entire family. What kind of work did you do here?" The moment had arrived. I could continue deflecting or I could let them discover the truth. "I'll be right back," I said, standing up again. This time I walked to the kitchen entrance where Tony was picking up another order. I borrowed his black apron and tied it around my waist, then grabbed a small plate of leftover appetizers. Walking back through the dining room, I approached our table from the kitchen side, carrying the plate like any other server. The revelation. "Good evening," I said in my most professional voice, setting the plate in the center of the table. "Compliments of the chef. How has everything been tonight?" My family stared at me in the apron, momentarily speechless. "Alex," Jennifer whispered. "What are you doing?" "Thanking you for dining at my restaurant," I replied, untying the apron. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad was the first to find his voice. "Your restaurant?" "Marcello's. I bought it 18 months ago." Mom looked around the elegant dining room as if seeing it for the first time. "You own this place?" "I own this place." Lisa's mouth was hanging open. But you're a consultant." "I consult for the restaurants I own. This is one of 4 properties in my portfolio." Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching respect. "For restaurants." "For so far. I'm looking at 2 more properties next month." The family absorbed this information in stunned silence. Around us, the restaurant continued its busy evening service. Servers moving efficiently between tables, the soft murmur of satisfied customers, the gentle clink of glasses and silverware. Since you're so successful, pay the bill, Dad said weakly, his earlier sarcasm now hanging in the air like a bad joke. I smiled and gestured around the restaurant. Consider it handled. Jennifer shook her head slowly. Alex, why didn't you tell us? We've been worried about your finances for months. Years, Mom corrected. We've been worried for years. Because every time I tried to explain my business, you assumed I was struggling, I replied. When I mentioned restaurant consulting, you pictured me helping small diners balance their books. When I talked about investment opportunities, you thought I meant maybe someday I could afford to buy into a franchise. Dad set down his limoncello glass with shaking hands. But you live in that small apartment, drive that old car. Because I reinvest my profits into acquiring new properties instead of upgrading my lifestyle. The apartment is comfortable and the car is reliable. Everything else goes into business growth. Robert was studying me with new interest. What kind of revenue are we talking about here? That's confidential, I said. But let's just say the restaurant business has been very good to me. The waiter Tony approached our table again, this time with a knowing smile. Is there anything else I can get for you, Mr. Castellano? The use of my full name, the name on the restaurant's business license, sent another shock through the table. Castellano. Michael repeated. You're listed as the owner under a different name? My business entity is registered under my full name. You've all called me Alex since childhood, but my legal name is Alessandro Castellano. Lisa laughed suddenly, a sound somewhere between amazement and hysteria. You're Alessandro Castellano? The restaurant owner who won the James Beard nomination last year. You heard about that? It was in the Business Journal. They called you one of the most innovative restaurateurs in the region. The pieces were falling into place for my family. The successful businessman they'd read about in the newspaper was their supposedly struggling relative. How much is this place worth? Dad asked bluntly. More than I paid for it, I replied. Real estate downtown has appreciated significantly since the renovation. Robert was now in full business mode. Alex, Alessandro, I have to ask. If you're this successful, why let us think you were struggling? Because I wanted to see if you valued me for who I am or what I own. Tonight answered that question pretty clearly. The table went quiet as the implications sank in. We never said we didn't value you, Mom protested. You spent the entire evening discussing my financial limitations and career failures, I replied. You chose this restaurant specifically because you assumed I couldn't afford it. You suggested having my birthday party in your backyard because upscale venues were more my speed. But we were trying to be considerate, Jennifer said. You were being condescending. There's a difference. The aftermath. The remainder of the evening was awkward as my family tried to process their completely incorrect assumptions about my life. They asked careful questions about my business, complimented the restaurant's atmosphere, and generally behaved like people who'd just discovered they'd been talking to a celebrity without knowing it. This changes everything, Robert said as we prepared to leave. Alessandro, I'd love to discuss investment opportunities with you sometime. I have some capital I've been looking to place in hospitality ventures. I'll consider it, I said diplomatically. Dad shook my hand formally at the restaurant entrance. Son, I owe you an apology. We clearly underestimated your success. You underestimated me, I corrected. My success is just the measurable result. Over the following weeks, my family's attitude toward me changed dramatically. Suddenly, my opinions on business and investment were sought out and respected. Invitations to family events included suggestions for upscale venues rather than budget-friendly alternatives. Mom called to apologize for years of well-intentioned but misguided concern about my finances. Dad asked for advice about his retirement portfolio. My siblings started referring to me as my brother the restaurateur in conversations with their friends. But the damage to our relationships had been done. I'd learned that my family's support was conditional on their understanding of my success. When my achievements didn't fit their narrow expectations, they'd assumed failure. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had to literally serve them dinner in my own restaurant before they recognized my accomplishments. 6 months later, at my birthday celebration, which was held at Marcello's rather than my parents' backyard, my family toasted my success and congratulated themselves on always believing in me. But I remembered the years of condescending advice, the assumptions about my limitations, and the evening when they'd worried about affording dinner in my own restaurant. The man they'd pitted for his lack of financial stability had been quietly building a restaurant empire while they planned budget-friendly birthday parties to accommodate his presumed poverty. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply letting people discover how wrong they've been about you while enjoying a perfectly prepared osso buco at your own establishment.